This is Joe from Cloud First Labs. In this video, I will show some of the key points on how to integrate Sharepoint with MuleSoft RPA. Part 1 showed how to have Sharepoint trigger a MuleSoft RPA process. This Part 2 video will be focused on the RPA builder piece of the integration. This portion was already completed in Part 1, but here we want to highlight the how-to. At high level, this RPA process works as follows. The caller sets an activity parameter for the Sharepoint file name. We saw this in the Part 1 video. So here is that Sharepoint file name activity parameter. Using that, the RPA process goes to the appropriate URL and downloads the file into the PC's local downloads directory. From there, the RPA process parses the file and performs data entry into another application, Salesforce in this particular case, using the data from that Sharepoint originating file. You can see the high-level design on the screen above. The main workflow steps are download CSV from Sharepoint, log into Salesforce, create quote from the CSV, and add products to quote, also using the CSV file contents. I want to focus on 3 aspects of this RPA process. 1, how to properly download the file from Sharepoint without needing to log in to Sharepoint at each RPA process run. 2, how to find the downloaded file. And 3, how to parse the data from the downloaded file. So for number 1, downloading the file from Sharepoint without logging in. First things first, we need the name of the file. That's from that activity parameter that we looked at earlier. And the Part 1 video showed that in action, Sharepoint passing that Sharepoint file name into this process. Now, for downloading the file from Sharepoint, we want to do it without having to log in case there is any MFA multi-factor authentication set up, which overcomplicates the RPA process. That doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it more tricky than what's ideal. So if we can get around that, it's a good idea. So let's see how it works without any special configuration. So I'm going to run this. As you can see, when the RPA process starts up, it requires a login. We want to avoid that. So I'm going to close out of the running RPA process, and let's see what happens if we just run this manually from the browser. So I open up Chrome here, and let's say I want to go into this testing directory. Okay, and notice I did not have to log in to anything to go to this URL. Also notice this J in the top right corner. It's like it knew who was logging in without me having to do anything special. That's because this Windows user has some user data saved on the computer, which includes the stored login information for Sharepoint. That way I don't have to manually type it in every time. We need to configure this into our RPA so that it uses this user data the same way that my browser does when I open it manually. Fortunately, this is a very easy step. To do that, let's edit the Chrome Web Sessions properties here and add an additional argument. We're going to add a user data dir for directory argument. Okay, and I pasted it in. So let's take a look. User data dir, and then we go to C users username. It's an environment variable. /app data /local /google /chrome /user data. So that's going to get to this user's user data. And as we just saw when I ran it manually, that's going to allow us to open SharePoint without entering a password. So for this to work correctly, note that the Windows user that executes this RPA process at runtime, it needs to be configured with the appropriate login to SharePoint. Anyway, now that we are specifically configuring the user data, let's rerun those steps. And wouldn't you know it, you didn't see a lot there, but for a brief moment, it popped up and said done in the top right corner. And there was a file name there because it successfully downloaded the file from SharePoint. And I'll leave that. Really, it blinked on and off very quickly, but I'll leave it showing on the screen here just so you know that it did show up. With that being the case, let's jump to key aspect number 2, which is how to find the downloaded file. This file is going to be found in the current user's downloads folder. I configured this as an activity parameter. So we're going to come here to activity parameters and see it as downloads dir. We go see users, username, downloads. We can look at this here if we wanted to. But anyway, I configured that as an activity parameter, but it also could have been just set up as a variable within a workflow. This is where the process will look for the downloaded file. Finally, let's look at number 3, how to parse the data from the downloaded file. Let's look at the add products to quote workflow here, as that is where the process is really using the downloaded file data. Here you will see a get number of lines in product CSV step. There's that downloads dir. Here's the SharePoint file name. So that's where this is going to grab how many lines are in the file. From that, we get the number of products in the file. And then down here, we loop over the products in that file, skipping the header row, of course. We add a step to read the current line from the file. We convert that into an array of values, and then from that array of values, we read product name and list price, the two values from that CSV line from that array that we care about. Then those product name and list price variables are used later on in data entry down below. Then those product name and list price variables are used in data entry steps down lower inside the loop. So inside this loop where we're looping over the products in the file, down here we're going to actually use product name and list price. Let's see where we're specifically entering that. We're going to enter the product name to search. And here we're doing keystrokes for list price. If we look at this, it's going to use the list price variable. So we use those values down here inside the loop. With all of that in place, the RPA process is able to run successfully and do data entry into the target system. I'll run it here, fast forwarding here and there to show a few highlights as the RPA process runs. Here we see the RPA process successfully downloading the file from SharePoint without needing to log in. Fast forward a bit, here we see the RPA process realize that a product from that CSV file does not yet exist, so it must go create it. So let's watch it do that. It's going to search for some product X. It doesn't exist. Okay, so we need to go close out of this. and we need to go create this product. This is all the RPA process running. It's what was configured. And here it is, very quickly creating a new product, doing some other configuration. And now it adds that product that we just saw it create to this quote that the RPA process is generating. And now, fast forwarding to the end, we see that the RPA process has successfully created the quote with the products specified in the Sharepoint CSV file. We're going to watch it, mark the status as complete. There we go. Saving and status changed successfully. That is how to write a MuleSoft RPA process that uses data uploaded to Sharepoint. Thank you for following along. If you have automation or integration needs, please reach out to us here at Cloud First Labs at cloudfirstlabs.com/contact, or use the YouTube comments, or use LinkedIn. We can help with your automation and integration needs.